Well, hello there, folks. This is a standalone video if you're watching the video. Otherwise, it's a segment on the audio show. If you are listening to the audio and you want to pick up the video and the little bit of assistance that goes along with this visually, you can go to the show notes for the audio and you can pull it up. If you're watching the video only, you found it some way separated from the podcast. This is a segment from an expert counsel podcast. And the segment right before it was one of our expert council members, Nick Ferguson, on growing rabbits. And I put it in that order for that reason. It might be worth looking up the audio version just to hear Nick talk about raising rabbits and how to do it without a lot of inputs from the system. Because what we're going to talk about today is, well, I want to start out with a quote. It was quote of the day for the podcast. It's by Ansel Adams. And it may not seem related to this topic, but he said once, myths and creeds are heroic struggles to comprehend the truth in the world. And I think one of the things that gets missed when we talk about myths, right, and legends and trying to use them to comprehend things in the world is that we conjure up our own myths and legends today. Myths and legends are not just ancient mysteries or ancient spiritual truths or ancient stories that those people in the past used. And we're somehow so much more sophisticated than those people that we don't today, this minute, this second, right now, individually conjure up our own myths and legends to try to deal with things. Now, what prompted today's segment by me is one of my videos this week. Somebody came in and said something really out of touch. It had to do with Bitcoin. And I'm sorry, you're still pitching that Bitcoin New World Order stuff or whatever nonsense. But his solution was that we should all save our pocket change. Now, he doesn't mean silver coinage, by the way. He means the crap, nickel-clad copper crap that we get right now in our change, so that we have something to exchange with our mutual assistance groups after they go digital with all the currency, as though anybody in such a group would want a freaking butchered version of the modern quarter that they put out in circulation today. I don't think that's going to be very valuable currency. It was the second person that came up though and said, well, why not do everything? Which generally I would agree with. But basically, he wanted to really push the idea of mutual assistance groups as well. And this idea that what's going to happen is we're going to have our call them freedom cells like John Bush does, mutual assistance groups, networks, blah, 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 all this. And you guys know I'm pro this idea. I'm not pro this mythology around it. Well, if we have our mutual assistance group, we'll just all trade with each other. We won't need anything else. Are you doing that now? Are you doing that now? No? Then shut up. What you're going to do is starve to death and or kill each other in these mutual assistance groups because you have a completely unrealistic mythology about what it takes to feed yourself and to feed your friends. And what I want to bring up on the screen now, this is from a presentation. I was a lot fatter back then. Dig me in that little stop gap there. And I'll have a link where you can listen to this entire presentation. It's about 45 minutes. It was a keynote at Permaculture Voices back in 2016 or 17. So it's 5 or 6 years ago. And it was on taking regenerative agriculture forward, or permaculture, call it either or. And it was in this particular part of the presentation, which is about a third of the way through, I was trying to explain the scope of the problem. And these are just some statistics. And again, these are from the Data Food Marketing Institute, and they are at least 5 years old. They may have been a year or two old at the time because I used what I could get my hands on when I put this presentation together. One average supermarket, now think about this, one average supermarket in the United States 5 years ago did about $500,000 in sales. The exact number, $516,727. Well, on the shelves would have over 42,000 products, would occupy 46,000 square feet. That's one supermarket, like in your town. And some of you live in bigger places, like I live in a fairly large city area. I'm out of the city, but I'm close. That's where I would go shopping. We have dozens of those within 10 miles of the house, and we have hundreds of them throughout the Dallas-Fort Worth metro mess, right? I did say metro mess. Nationally, they employ 3.4 million people. Their total sales, and this is back then before Bidenflation and what have you, $638 billion annually. $638 billion of food sold to the end user at the end point. And they operate, say what you want about them, but they operate at about an average profit margin of only 1.5%. Okay. And again, if you want to see this whole presentation, which is one of the better live presentations I ever did, it is on YouTube on another person's channel who put it up. I have a link to it. You can find it in the notes for this episode. The other thing that happened when I did this presentation, I was standing in front of hundreds of people, close to 1,000. Many of them were farmers. And I said later in that presentation, who here makes more than a 1.5% profit on their farm? One hand went up. One. Now, some of them weren't farmers, but probably half of them were, meaning that most of them weren't even making a profit. These are people trying to change the world. These are people growing food the true right way, the regenerative way. They weren't making any money. Many of them were very new to this, etc. There was probably a few that were making more than that. Maybe they didn't understand the question, but it wasn't like a bunch of hands went up. This is reality. And people that think they're going to feed themselves from a garden, they don't realize how much stuff they buy in their groceries. I would say try to feed yourself for 2 weeks without going to the grocery store, without opening your freezer or your refrigerator, and then tell me you're going to do this with your mutual assistance group, where you might be the most squared away person in that group. This is the mythology that's going on here. There is within the human psyche the concept of safety in numbers. We are a naturally communal species. There's a few people that are true curmudgeons, all the way hermits, that are happy to go live in a cave somewhere. If that was you, you wouldn't be listening to this. You'd already be doing it. There's people like me. I don't like big crowds of people. If I'm in a big crowd of people for too long, I need to get away. I mean, I go do big events where people want to talk to me. And I literally always tell the event organizer, I need probably 3 or 4 times in any given day the ability to walk away, not see anybody for 10 minutes and recharge, have a bottle of water or something. And so you need to give me a place I can go. And that's after years and years of conditioning myself to not feel that way. And I've never been an introvert in of itself. It's just when there's tons of people around you trying to get to you, it puts me off a little bit at times, and I need to recharge, so I'm nice to everybody. But even me, like, you put me in a situation where if I didn't have my family, I'm going to reach out and do more work in building a social group. I like to be around some other people. And this is innate, and it's in us, and it's because we are hardwired for it, because it is how humans adapted and occupied the entire planet. It wasn't done as individuals or even couples walking around with 2 kids. It was done with some form, in the best way possible, of collectivism. I know some of you don't like that word, but I'm not talking about government here. I'm talking about 20 people banding together, et cetera. So there's a comfort in that. So then people start these mutual assistance groups, and then they live this little fantasy world, kind of like you Boogaloo boys do, right? And then we're going to all be okay because I have this group. What I said in that presentation that I referenced earlier is that we're not trying to compete with that market. We're trying to enter it. We're trying to coexist and eventually replace it. And that has to be the mentality with food production and all the other things that we need. This idea, I know what somebody's saying right now. They're probably typing me an email all angry, right? With their earbuds in, listening to the audio. You stupid jerk. We only need to feed ourselves. No, you don't. That's what makes you a target. We need to rebuild the entire system, and we do need to do it as individuals and groups first. But this idea that everything will go to shit and then you guys will all just work with each other and everything will be fine is a fucking fantasy, okay? It's a complete and total fantasy. It's not going to happen. It's not going to work. And you better pull your head out of your ass about that right away. And this is why I teach so much about preparedness from a standpoint of, yes, self-sufficiency, and that's your solar panels. That's self-sufficiency. That's measured in percentage. That's how much food can you grow for yourself. That's a percentage. Very few of you is going to be 100%. If you drink coffee, you're going to grow exactly 0 of that. And if your mutual assistance group has a coffee roaster in it, that's great. But where does their coffee come from? Probably Costa Rica or Colombia or Africa or something like that. We are not going to live anything approaching a comfortable life without the modern economy working. And that modern economy, thank God, may change and transform in positive and negative ways, but it's not going away. This whole idea that we're going to all revert back to the way things were, pre-colonial times or something is another freaking fantasy. And you need to get over it. But there could be some real shortfalls. Do you know what will feed you? 3 months to 4 months of food stored up for yourself and your immediate family. And I guess what you'd call refugee rations. That's your rice and beans and shit like that. And if we're going to feed ourselves, guys, we're going to feed ourselves more than with anything else. We're going to feed ourselves with meat. Meat, eggs, dairy. Those are the things that you can produce anywhere, period. I'm not poo-pooing on gardens. I love gardens. I've taught about growing gardens forever. Fruit trees, nut trees, etc. All that stuff. You want to do that, that's great. But there's nothing you can do that will provide you the nutrient density that animal products will. And I'm talking about full nutrient density. I'm talking about caloric yield that you get to consume versus the caloric yield you have to put into it, right? The effort you put in versus the energy you get out. I'm talking about nutrients and micronutrients. I'm talking about minerals. I'm talking about vitamins. All this talk about, acai berries are superfoods or raspberries are superfoods or pomegranates. It's all bullshit. You know what a superfood is? Ruminants, red meat are the real superfoods. If I try to feed you on nothing but pomegranate, you will die. If I try to feed you on nothing but corn, you will die. If I try to feed you on nothing but goji berry, you will die. Pick a vegetable or a fruit and try to live on it 100% of the time and you will die. If the only thing I feed you from now for the rest of your life is pieces and parts of pig or pieces and parts of lamb or pieces and parts of beef, you will not die and you won't develop a single freaking nutritional deficiency. The end. Infinity. I'm sorry. I don't care what your doctor told you, who was programmed to lie to you and doesn't even know they're lying. And so we need to focus on animal production systems, and we need to focus on animal production systems that we can either store lots of the input feeds that we need for. So that's when you get into your poultry and things like that, or that we can provide ourselves the feed for our animals. Nick Ferguson's segment from today. You can, with a small area full of willow trees and poplar and things like that, provide fodder, and you can feed yourself rabbit for the rest of your life. All you have to do is procure enough fat to go with it to make sure you're getting a good fat intake to go along with it. But we can use that same system. We can grow lamb. We can grow pigs. Geese eat that. Geese love fodder. I feed my geese that all the time. Muscovy ducks love fodder. Now you got eggs. There's all type. I feed a lot of my poultry, specifically my ducks and geese and my Muscovy ducks. I feed them aquatic vegetation like water hyacinth, high protein. This is the way that you need to be thinking. You don't need to be thinking, oh, I have this one little freaking thing, and then my mutual assistance group is going to be how I get all the rest of my shit with pocket change or some other nonsense. Not going to happen. You need to think about how to feed you, and then you need to think about what you have that is actually enough value to exchange with members of your groups or your freedom cells or whatever you want. But don't for 1 second think, I don't give a shit who you are. I challenge you. I will walk into your mutual assistance group and I will say, okay, drill time, boys, let's go. 2 months. None of y'all get to buy one damn thing outside of your group to survive. And most of you that are online talking shit like this fellow was, you will either break and go outside the circle or you will hate each other by the time it's over with. Because, in the words of Ansel Adams, myths and creeds are heroic struggles to comprehend the truth in the world. And the truth in the world that is difficult to understand in this. And the real reason I wanted to do this today is the scope of the problem. One supermarket, $500,000 a week. One supermarket, $500,000 a week. The next time you drive down the road through any kind of town of any size, every time you pass a Walmart Supercenter, a Super Target, an Albertsons, a Publix, etc., just go $500,000. That's $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million. And know that number is much bigger today because of inflation. But just do it. Just $500,000 is easy to keep in your head. $500,000, $1 million, $1.5 million. That's $2 million worth of food. And that's the last step in the equation. There's a bunch of steps in that equation to get that food on people's table. And I know what you're thinking, but Jack, I don't eat most of that shit. I don't eat Betty Crocker cake mix and Ho-Hos and Twinkies. Good. You know who does? Your neighbors, all the people around you. The scope of this problem is so large, it is causing many of us to form our own mythology, to form our own legends, to form our own beliefs that everything will be just fine if we have a little group put together and we'll all exchange shit. The group is one piece of a multi-pronged plan. If you actually have a plan, most of you don't have a plan. You have a placeholder in your mind. You have a placeholder in your mind to try to make the fear go away. Here's the good news. You don't need that shit. We are not going to have the end of the world as we know it, like i.e. prepper porn, come from this. We are going to have some really, really bad times. But what do I always say about really bad times? They are the greatest opportunities in the history of humanity. If you go back and you look at people who have built the most incredible fortunes, the most incredible lives, most of them began amid destruction. If you are well fortified as you go into this, if you protect your wealth, if you protect your family, if you protect your health, if you protect your food supply, and yes, if you have good connections with groups and networking that you rely on for what they can do, but don't be dishonest about yourself as to what they can do. The next 10 years will either make you or break you. It's going to be your choice. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap up for today. Again, if you like this segment, you want to hear more, get on over to the audio side of things, and that link will be in the show notes.